to introduce our next speaker, I think straight off the back of Joel, my only thought is, if not now, then when? And if not us, then who? And all of you being here today, you've put your money down with your beliefs. And Joel's just enhancing and endorsing the fact that you're at this point. And our next speaker, I'm just going to introduce her with a quote, because it comes off the back of that quote that I just said. The time to defend the growing movement of small-scale producers has come. Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, Tammi Jonas.
I'm just going to warn you, I might get emotional. I also, quick, boring bit of housekeeping, although not for the parents. Mara, wonderful Mara, who's been running the circus activities for the kids over there, has packed up. So if you think they're being supervised, that's no longer true. I'm going to tell you a brief version of how we've come here today. 2.5 years ago, PrimeSafe rolled up our driveway, the meat regulator in Victoria, and made us destroy all of our salamis that were hanging in the salami shed over there that were our personal supply. We said, does this mean you can go into our fridge and destroy our food as well? And they said, well, if we think it might be a public health risk, yes. We asked that, just quickly, the story is online, but just quickly, we held a salami workshop a week before, and some of the participants who'd been there had been allowed to take some of the salami they'd made on the day home with them to cure at home. We didn't know at that time it was a breach of the Act, and when they came up the driveway and told us, we actually respectfully said, we're very sorry, and would you like us to recall those salamis and tell people to stop curing them and throw them away? We're very sorry, didn't mean to do the wrong thing here. And they said, no, you don't have to do that, but we're going to destroy all of these ones here. Now, if that doesn't show you what a nonsense the whole thing is, where's the protection of public health there? So that was 2.5 years ago. We became obviously fairly enraged after we got over the sobbing, or me anyway. And the next stage was in December of that same year. There was the change to the raw milk laws in Victoria that happened overnight. Again, these stories are all well documented. But on the back of that, the tireless Lisa Heenan and Darren Doherty of Regrarians, and who created the beautiful documentary Polyfaces, organised to have Joel at a major event in Melbourne, the Eat, Buy, Grow rally in Collingwood Town Hall. I think there were 400 or 500 people there, and she pulled it together like with nothing. And Joel spoke and gave, as usual, powerful kind of talk about why taking away our right to access raw milk or to produce raw milk and not have to sell it to a processor and never make any living, as our dairy farmers increasingly can't. Why the right to sell that was so important. And a number of producers spoke and told their story. Vicky Jones from Mountain View told her heartbreaking story of what had been happening on her farm since that raw milk incident. Alleged incident. That was the catalyst. We then had a meeting with Joel and a bunch of raw milk advocates and other small-scale farming advocates, and I was president of the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance at the time. And Joel told us about the Farm and Consumer Legal Defence Fund, and we were like, well, we need one of those. And for those of us who'd had overnight changes to the regulations, either change to the regulations or somebody roll up our driveway and destroy our product, which I learned in the process of all of this was happening to other sort of small-scale producers with farm gate shops where PrimeSafe would roll in, say, that council registration that you have for your meat in that commercial fridge in this approved registered facility is not legal because you're not registered with PrimeSafe. And the councils are actually approving these things because they don't know the law either. And then PrimeSafe rolls up unannounced and destroys all the meat. I kept hearing more stories because we told ours and realized how serious the problem was, that it's endemic that people are being stopped from producing the kind of food we do. And in the meat space especially, they're actually destroying perfectly good meat. I remember saying actually, as the inspector made me pull the salamis down, I said to you, I was sobbing, but to understand that there are people who are hungry in the world and that we put everything that we are into growing animals properly and respectfully. And then I'm the butcher. I carefully bring this product to people, and this, in this case, is actually my family's food for the next year. And you're just going to throw it away? And she didn't understand that at all. And I realized then that the regulator doesn't understand what we're about at all. They've got, as Joel says, the orthodoxy of sterility and food safety is their god. And they don't understand what we're talking about. So after the meeting with Joel, we thought, okay, we're going to get this legal defense fund going, and the Food Sovereignty Alliance started working on it, but we're all volunteers, so it's been a 2-year process. And in that 2 years, I've heard so many stories like ours. So you're going to hear from some of them in a moment. You're going to hear Elgaar's story of 2 years of being shut down by the regulator without a single food safety incident. You're going to hear Moview's story of being shut down from their herd share, of providing raw milk to their herd share community who own the cows. They milk them for them. And you're going to hear from Joe Stritch, who was demanded to stop farming free-range pigs, much like ours that you saw out the back there, very similar setup, because of the definition of intensive in Victoria. So in short, if you're a free-range pig farmer, if you import more than 50% of your nutritional requirements for your animals, which we all do, poultry and pig farmers all do, it's very difficult to raise pigs and poultry because they're monogastrics just off the paddocks. And so we're all considered intensive. It doesn't matter whether you have 1 pig or 10 pigs or 10,000 pigs. It doesn't matter if they're indoors or outdoors. It doesn't matter anything. We're all intensive. So we're required to have a permit. And when Joe had some new neighbors move in, some horsey people who didn't like her pigs, they turned her in for not having a permit. She'll tell you the story. And she's in a green wedge zone where you can't have an intensive permit. Joe's now farming in Gippsland, no longer in the Yarra Valley. But these are also 3 stories of resilience. These are the farmers you're going to hear from. They're all still farming. They're the fighters. They're like everyone who's actually here, who's like, we're not giving up. We're not walking away. We're not letting the big agriculture. We're not letting the duopoly. We're not letting corrupt government officials. We're not letting these people determine what we can grow and who we can feed it to. It's time to turn it around. And Joel gives a really good example of the loss of breastfeeding and how breastfeeding was deemed to be, unhygienic. And in the 50s and 60s, it basically went away. But there was a movement in the 70s where it came back. And we feel the same about real food, but it takes all of us turning up, like all of you have today. And if, the future belongs to those who turn up, well, I want it to be this crowd. And I'm just going to finish with one of my favorite philosophers, who I don't need to name, and say that if the world belongs to those who own the means of production, that's what he says, then we really need to take that ownership back. And it needs to be small-scale producers embedded in communities who care about how animals are raised, what soils are treated like, what our children and ourselves are fed. We're the ones who need to own the means of production. And that's why we need a legal defense fund, and we need a collective group of people working together for change. If you haven't already joined the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance, I know Sally will mention it later, but you certainly should, because we're not going to do this alone. Actually, loads of you here are already members, obviously. I'm just going to finish by saying thank you. I'm overwhelmed by what a gorgeous group of people have turned up and learned more about the kind of farming all of us do and why it matters, and seen the sort of, we're not a bunch of hippies. You went through my boning room. I mean, I'm kind of a hippie, right? But you've seen our boning room. We run a really good operation, and the regulator has no grounds to suggest that we produce unsafe food, and that's what they're still doing, and we have to stop that. So thanks for turning up.